Welcome to the webinar. You have entered as an organizer and may now speak to any other organizers or panelists on the line. When you are ready to begin the presentation, press the Start Broadcast button on the GoToWebinar control panel to allow all attendees to hear you. This system will notify you once you begin your broadcast. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Sound check. Hello. Good evening, everyone. If you can hear me, please use the questions field here in this application or platform to let me know how the sound is, and I can make any adjustments before I get started. Okay, excellent. Thank you. We'll get started here in just about a minute. Looks like we still have some folks that are maybe logging in. All right, I'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining this evening. My name is Jason DiLorenzo, and I'm the founder and executive director for an organization called Doctors Without Quarters, DWOQ. We are a student loan advisory that works exclusively with graduate health professionals like yourselves to help you early in your career navigate both a complex and evolving student loan marketplace. We've been working with your program, AUC Medical, for about 7 years now to provide education to graduates and help those who are seeking to navigate the marketplace do so effectively. And so what we're going to talk about in tonight's presentation is the following. We're going to take a look at the typical AUC medical school graduate profile in terms of economics, how much student loan debt you have, expected incomes based on specialty, because all of these things ultimately will dictate what the right student loan repayment action plan is for you. We'll talk about the repayment marketplace in terms of an overview, but we're going to put a highlight or a microscope on those programs that make the most sense for medical graduates today. We're going to talk about federal loan forgiveness and other forgiveness or repayment opportunities, as well as discuss some of the legislation that exists today, as well as how that legislation is proposed to be changed in the future and what you can do to effectively navigate the marketplace on throughout your career as you have student loan debt. One of the programs that we'll get into more detail on is the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, which is relevant if you've heard of this program before, because 90+% of teaching hospitals in the United States are qualified for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program as they are 501c3 nonprofit organizations. We're going to go through some payment and savings case studies with an eye towards those who are graduating from AUC this year. I'm going to carry the discussion all the way through a training exit interview, much like you'll make decisions now about what to do with your student loans during your training, whether that's 3 years or 8 or more years, where typically residents and fellows will have modest incomes and need payment relief on their student loans during training. Once you transition to practice and you find out, and you may not know the answer to this yet, most likely you don't, who your employer is and how much money you'll be making, at that point, you're going to want to you'll reach sort of a fork in the road, so to speak, and you'll want to make decisions about either continuing on towards federal relief or flipping the script and being aggressive about paying down your debt with ideally a much higher income than you had during training. We'll talk a little bit about budgeting and other financial considerations such as tax filing and how that impacts your student loan repayment strategy. And we are excited for the past, this is our third year now. Your school, your financial aid office has partnered with us to provide one-on-one detailed consultations to help you navigate the marketplace for your specific profile, free of charge to you. So we'll talk about that offering and how to take advantage of it. It is no secret that federal student debt levels for medical graduates generally and for AUC medical school graduates have risen substantially over the past 20 plus years. I understand the average for an AUC med graduate to be around $375,000 in overall federal student loan debt. Some of you may be less than that. Some of you may be more than that. It's not uncommon for us to be consulting individuals who maybe are married to other doctors early in their careers who also have student loan debt, and cumulatively it's 4 plus 4, so $800,000+ of federal student loan debt. It's important to understand that no matter what your debt level is, you want to take also into consideration how much income you're going to be earning during your training, both individually and in your household, as well as what you expect to earn once you transition to practice, as well as you might know that today. Your sector of employment will also be important. If you're going to stay within a nonprofit environment, you may be eligible for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, and it would certainly make sense, as we'll, discuss, to ensure that you're positioning to maximize the savings available in this program because it is substantial. I might even suggest that many doctors today are making career decisions based on the savings available through this program early in your careers. Ultimately, what a repayment timeline is going to look like for those of you who are graduating this year, and this is true whether you've graduated already or you're graduating in May or June. On your federal student loans, which namely are comprised of Stafford loans and Grad Plus loans for graduate borrowers today at Title IV schools or where you're eligible for federal student loans, these loans have a 6-month grace period. So let's say you're graduating in May of 2019 of this year now. In roughly November, you'll be tasked with going into repayment on your federal student loans. What we're going to talk about here for a few minutes is the income-driven loan repayment options because they are far superior to choosing like a forbearance or deferment during your residency. If you're going to enter an income-driven repayment plan, and I believe that for most medical graduates today with substantial student loan debt, it's going to make sense to use an income-driven repayment plan. You're going to want to file a tax return for last year. You have until mid-April to do this. And if ultimately you weren't working in 2018 because you're in medical school, a zero income on your tax return can be used to position you for as low as a zero payment in your first year of training and start positioning you for substantial savings through both loan forgiveness and available interest subsidies. Now, if you're matching to a residency program in July, which I assume all of you are expecting, and I hope you will do, in July, you'll begin residency, you'll begin earning an income. And then again, if for a November graduate, your grace period is going to end. If you're a May graduate around November, it's at that point that you'll have to pick a repayment plan. If you're choosing an IDR or income driven repayment plan, you're going to need to renew this annually throughout your training and possibly even into your transition to practice. And we call sort of the training exit a fork in the road with respect to loan repayment, which is why we'll talk about a training exit analysis. I should also ask that if you have some questions, feel free to write them in here along the way. I may answer some of them along the way, so I will read out the questions at the end of our presentation here. I expect we'll probably be done about 30 minutes after the hour with my content, and then I can answer some questions. It may make sense for you to consolidate all of your federal student loans. You can only do so after you graduate from medical school and your loans are no longer an in-school loan deferment. What a consolidation means is that all the loans you've been taking out over the past 4 years or more, if you were borrowing federal student loans for other programs, these can all be grouped into one single loan federal student loan, direct loan, meaning from the Department of Education, with a weighted average interest rate. So there's not a higher interest rate associated with grouping them all together, save for the weighted average that rounds up to the nearest eighth. A single loan is often easier to navigate through the marketplace than a group of loans, where, with loan servicers today and errors being rampant, it is simpler to administrate a single loan. So a lot of times we talk about consolidation after graduation. Whether or not it's a necessary step, it can be one that is elective. Your repayment options today, and let me just paint the landscape here. If you've got $375,000 of federal student loan debt, today's graduates, that weighted average interest rate is probably around between 6.5% and 7%. And so on a standard 10-year repayment plan, which is ultimately what, if you didn't do anything with your student loans 6 months after you graduated, your servicer or servicers is going to place you in the 10-year standard repayment plan. So for graduates today, if you haven't already looked at this number, I do not mean to shock you, because there are alternatives. But the standard 10-year repayment plan on roughly $375,000 in federal student loan debt is about $4,200 to $4,300 per month. Now, for obvious reasons, doctors in training are choosing to get payment relief through the federal programs that are available. Now, I call forbearance or deferment, or specifically forbearance, I call that the F word for doctors in training today if they have student loan debt. The reason is because if you choose forbearance, which is a simple box to check once your grace period is exhausted, you do get to pay zero on your federal student loans, but this 6.5% to 7% interest starts accruing against you. It can capitalize year over year in training, and you're not positioning for any loan forgiveness or interest subsidies. The income-driven plans are far more preferable savings-wise to choosing forbearance or deferment, and they're still affordable. Now, refinancing I've shown in red here. A lot of people get the terms refinancing and consolidation somewhat misconstrued. With consolidation, you're keeping all of your federal student loans federal. They remain with the Department of Education. With refinancing, what essentially is happening, and you probably see companies advertising or emailing you or pop-ups on your computer, companies like SoFi and Common Bond and Credible.com and Earnest. These are all companies that have specialized in reducing interest rates on federal student loans for graduates who have really good underwriting profiles. The underwriting profile of a young doctor in training does not typically drive the best interest rates in this marketplace. And also, when you refinance, you give up all of the federal student loan options that we're going to be talking about, specifically the income-driven repayment plans, interest subsidies, and loan forgiveness. So I caution you against refinancing, even though lower rates might seem attractive. We find many doctors, it's either a waste of time or totally inappropriate and unsuitable to be refinancing your loans when you're giving up significant potential federal benefit. So the income-driven repayment options are likely the best option for you. There's 5 available today. There's really 2 that are going to make the most sense for you guys as a group. And that's the pay-as-you-earn program or the revised pay-as-you-earn program. These are the 2 you're probably going to want to be focusing on. They both require 10% of your discretionary income, which is based either off a tax return from the prior year, which is why we suggest filing a tax return for 2018, or a payroll stub if you've started working. That's obviously for you guys going to reflect a most likely higher income than what you earned your last year of medical school. After 20 or 25 years, depending on the program, outstanding debt, if you haven't already paid it off based on your income, will be forgiven as a taxable event. And after 10 years, if you work full-time, cumulatively for a nonprofit organization, which many doctors can and do, you're eligible for tax-free public service loan forgiveness. And again, 90+% of teaching hospitals in the United States are 501c3s, therefore they qualify. So I would advance that it makes the most sense to use an income-driven repayment plan during training to reduce the amount of accrued interest that's ultimately accruing and potentially capitalizing against you. which also almost by happenstance or accidentally also positions you for public service loan forgiveness. So that if you're going to work in that type of environment, you'll have 3+ years of public service loan forgiveness of those 10 required years done. So let's get into some numbers here. In terms of your summary of options for a 4-year training, we're talking now about federal student loan debt, your Stafford loans and your Grad Plus loans. In this case, this graduate has $375,000 in federal student loan debt. The average interest rate is 6.5%. He or she has a starting salary of $50,000 in her first year of training, and we're going to grow that salary at about 3% a year to rise with the rate of inflation, which is how all of our case studies are calculated unless directed otherwise. Your 10-year standard repayment plan, as we talked about, is about $4,200 a month. In this case, that is, if not untenable, highly undesirable for most doctors in training. And on the flip side, if you were to choose forbearance, which a lot of physicians that you might talk to that graduated medical school 10+ years ago and had less debt than you at lower interest rates, they might have done forbearance or deferment, and that was maybe the right move. But with now interest subsidies, higher rates, higher debt, and income-driven plans available, that's going to be the option you wish to choose once you move into training. And in this case, whether you choose pay-as-you-earn or revised pay-as-you-earn, we see payments, in the first year, if they're based off a zero income from your tax return, are as low as $0. And then they rise to just under $300 a month in year 4. What are you getting in this case by making these lower payments? Well, you're not reducing the amount of interest that's accruing against you. However, in revised pay-as-you-earn, you are putting a dent in that, because revised pay-as-you-earn with your payments is only going to charge you half of what interest is accruing against you. But revised pay-as-you-earn offers 25-year taxable loan forgiveness. It is also eligible for public service loan forgiveness. So in this profile, that interest benefit I'm mentioning is worth about $40,000 in interest savings over 4 years. And your debt won't capitalize. Same with pay-as-you-earn. You're going to make the same payments. The interest won't capitalize. It does accrue, and there's no interest benefit, but taxable loan forgiveness is available after only 20 years in this case. And so often we find graduates are trying to choose between pay-as-you-earn or revised pay-as-you-earn based on the immediate gratification of less accruing interest, but a longer payment term to get forgiveness. Although I should say that they both are eligible for 10-year public service loan forgiveness. Obviously, making lower payments is going to allow you more access to your income during training. We call that liquidity. And again, your payments are going to count towards loan forgiveness, either public service loan forgiveness, 10 years, or 20 or 25-year forgiveness based on the plan that you use. Now, we talk about tax filing considerations, and for medical school graduates this year, we always suggest filing a tax return for 2018 if you've had little to no income. You may be asking yourself, what if I'm married or I'm planning to get married, and I have a high income earning spouse that has no student loan debt? I mean, we would probably call that a good situation, particularly while you're in training. However, if you're filing your taxes with your spouse, married and jointly, your income-driven repayment plan will be based on that cumulative household income. It's in this case where we have another deciding factor for pay-as-you-earn versus revised pay-as-you-earn, because if you're using pay-as-you-earn, you can actually file your taxes married and separately, isolate your own income, and keep your student loan payments low. If you're using revised pay-as-you-earn and you're married, they're ultimately, through the application process, going to require that you submit both you and your spouse's income, and you can't really circumvent in an honest way the requirement of using household income. So those of you who are married or getting married and have spouses that earn higher incomes, you may be incented more to use the pay-as-you-earn program if you're trying to position for maximum loan forgiveness. I should also just mention that with these income-driven plans, if you're making, say, Roth or IRA contributions, or I should say traditional IRA contributions or qualified retirement contribution plans through your employer, in some cases, these can reduce your adjusted gross income, therefore reduce your student loan payment and help increase loan forgiveness. So always best to take inventory of the best way to file your taxes to maximize student loan savings. I'm going to cover public service loan forgiveness here on a more macro level. We can get into the details of how this applies to you specifically in your one-on-one consultations. But eligible loans for public service loan forgiveness are going to be direct federal student loans. Now, the government nationalized student loans in July of 2010. And so direct loans is your lender for any federal student loans you've taken out since July of 2010, if they are Stafford or Grad Plus loans. If you have loans before that, they may be non-direct. They're called FFEL loans, FFEL. And you must note that those are not eligible for public service loan forgiveness. Those loans, Perkins loans, health professions student loans, and LDS, or loans for disadvantaged students, are all not eligible, but they can be consolidated to a direct consolidation loan and become eligible. Private loans or institutional loans or other debt that you may have through a private institution, those are not going to be eligible for public service loan forgiveness, nor they can be consolidated. So you'll need to figure out a separate repayment plan for any of those types of loans. Now, eligible payments for doctors today, it's going to be any payment used when you're using an income-driven repayment plan, even if that payment is zero. As long as you are enrolled, that quote-unquote payment will count towards forgiveness through either taxable loan forgiveness at 20 or 25 years or public service loan forgiveness at 10 years. These payments just need to be cumulative. They don't need to be consecutive, but they need to be made while you're working full-time for an eligible employer, and that's direct employment by any state, federal, or local government or entity, or any 501c3 nonprofit organization. Again, your employment must be full-time. There is a certification form available from the Department of Education that you should use to document qualifying employment. As somebody from your hospital, an authorized official, will complete this for you, and then you'll send it in to the department. Your servicer will become Fed loans. It is important to understand this process because, unfortunately, the Fed loans tends to still make errors, as do many loan servicers, and that they're also not very prescriptive or analytical in providing advice to you. They often, as you probably have seen in the media and otherwise, have been under pressure for misdirecting borrowers. So you want to make sure you understand your strategy or are working with an advocate like us to navigate the marketplace for you. I mentioned that 90+% of teaching hospitals are eligible for public service loan forgiveness. So it begs the question, am I going to work for a qualifying entity after I'm done with training? And the answer is going to be based on specialty. I would even say that state of employment matters. For example, in California, most hospital systems, even if they're nonprofit systems, hire their physicians through contracts with for-profit practice groups. So like the Kaiser system, if you go do your residency there, you're employed by that foundation. It's a nonprofit, but when you transition to practice and stay in the same exact place, if your paycheck then becomes from TPMG, the Permanente Medical Group, you are no longer eligible for public service loan forgiveness. Now, other states like Florida and Arizona, we tend to find that their hospital systems will employ physicians from all specialties directly from their 501c3 nonprofit. So there might be a greater opportunity, no matter your specialty, for public service loan forgiveness in certain states versus others. There are some specialties where we have greater visibility regarding availability here. Emergency medicine, anesthesia, and radiology in all states seem to have more employment from for-profit groups. And again, in all states, if you're family medicine, psychiatry, pediatrics, or working in an academic capacity, typically see public service loan forgiveness more available here, particularly in academics where you're probably employed by a teaching institution, which is going to be a nonprofit in most cases. So let's do a 10-year case study. I want to get you guys familiar with what payments will look like over 10 plus years. In this case, we got a little lower than average debt, $300,000. she or he is eligible for public service loan forgiveness in training, meaning using an income-driven repayment plan directly employed by a nonprofit. He or she expects a $250,000 income in year 5 when they transition to practice. And we'll throw in a variable here. They're getting married in 2019, and their spouse earns $125,000 a year and has no student loan debt. Now, in this case, I'm suggesting in this particular case study, the revised pay-as-you-earn program, at least while he or she is single. Now, based on that 10-year income trajectory, that's roughly a $50,000 income the first year of training through 4 years of training, and then a starting salary in year 5 of $250,000. If he or she continues to use revised pay-as-you-earn and doesn't have the ancillary or additional income from a spouse, if you stayed in revised pay-as-you-earn over that 10-year period, you're going to pay $124,000 out of pocket based on this income. Now, tax-free loan forgiveness available here is over $318,000. Now, what's important to note is that the estimated out-of-pocket cost, because tax-free loan forgiveness available, this remains the same no matter how high your student loan debt is. So if you're logged in here and you have $500,000+ of federal student loan debt, if you're pursuing public service loan forgiveness, your estimated out-of-pocket is still going to be the $124,000 if you're basing your payments on your own specific income for all 10 years. So those of you with higher levels of debt might be incented to make sure that years 5 through 10 are in fact with a qualifying entity. We'll talk about some calculations that help determine this in terms of decisioning shortly. Also, with the revised pay-as-you-earn program, I mentioned an interest benefit. In this case, it results in an effective interest rate on these loans of just under 3.5%, which is a nice benefit of the revised pay-as-you-earn program. Now, if you get married in year 2 of your training, or at least that reflects in your tax return in year 2 of your training, it may be wise for you to switch from the revised pay-as-you-earn program to the pay-as-you-earn program. And you can switch programs throughout training based on availability of these programs and the appropriateness, obviously, of switching. And this way, he or she would be able to keep the payments down. In other words, targeting this $124,000 out of pocket. But she would have to file her taxes, or he, married and separately, to isolate their own income for the purposes of keeping the payments lower. Now, other loan repayment programs are available. If I'm using federal examples, National Health Service Corps is probably a really common example for graduates today. There's Indian Health Service, Department of Defense. These provide loan repayment following your years of service. So there's somewhat of an immediate gratification available here. There are also states that have specific programs that are designed kind of to match the federal programs if you work in an underserved area. I should note that if you are pursuing some federal or state repayment program, you can still be eligible for public service loan forgiveness to forgive the balance of loans after you complete the 10 cumulative required years. Most of these programs are going to make you pay their repayment. Say it's $30,000 a year for 3 years. They're gonna write a check to your loan servicer, so there's a little bit of overlap of benefit there, but ultimately, the two can coexist. I think that's the biggest takeaway for other repayment programs you might be considering. If you're already familiar with public service loan forgiveness, you might have seen some reports in the media that the current administration, and actually the Obama administration before the current one, were proposing reauthorization of the Higher Education Act and limiting or eliminating public service loan forgiveness. I want to implore you guys to understand that if you have public service loan forgiveness available in your master promissory notes, which I'm sure you've all read them cover to cover, but it does exist in federal student loan master promissory notes today, you are expected to be grandfathered in. So you're a unique class of individuals that we believe will be eligible for public service loan forgiveness. And if changes are made, they will apply to future borrowers. And so we do expect public service loan forgiveness to be available. The folks that are applying for it today, we're doing so before the nationalization. They started the progress before the nationalization of student loans, and income-driven repayment plans didn't even become popular until 2010 or 2011. And so we don't expect that most people that are applying for loan forgiveness today would be approved. We're going to see that number start to hit the budget in 2020 and increasingly in future years. So again, your promissory note matters with respect to your eligibility for loan forgiveness. It's important to understand that this marketplace is evolving. So based on our discussion and our one-on-one consultation with you guys, we will provide direction and execute the action plan that makes sense for you today. With an income-driven repayment plan, you're going to need to renew that plan annually throughout your training and beyond, if it makes sense. You'll want to make sure that you're also updating your strategy based on the evolving marketplace. And if you're talking to loan servicers, I mentioned this before, understand that they are not, incented to or otherwise providing the type of analysis and support that you need as doctors during your training. They're not equipped to talk about the things that we're talking about here. And again, with the media alarm out there about the government not honoring public service loan forgiveness, that's no surprise to the experts out there. These folks that are applying today aren't eligible. We fully expect those who follow the right action plan to be eligible for public service loan forgiveness based on what we've seen in proposed legislation, even if they eliminate public service loan forgiveness in future years. I want to talk quickly about the fork in the road here, and then we'll move towards wrapping things up. If you are transitioning to practice to a for-profit role, and loan forgiveness, either taxably or through public service loan forgiveness, no longer makes sense for you. In today's marketplace, doctors that are transitioning to practice, let's say you've done 5 years of a surgery residency and you're signing up now for a for-profit surgery group who's paying you $350,000 a year in starting salary. You're probably not going to want to pursue taxable loan forgiveness. You're not going to want to have debt 20 or 25 years out. If you wish to at that point, or it makes sense to accelerate repayment on your loans, it's at this point now that the refinancing marketplace can be competitive. We see rates as low as 4 or less percent if you're able to pay loans back over 5 years, up to around 5.5% to 6% for terms of 20 years. That's today's marketplace. The private marketplace is always going to be based on the economy, whereas your federal student loan rates are fixed based on the years that you took them out over the past 4 years. But it's at that point that if you can find lower rates and you got to accelerate repayment on your loans and ultimately pay down this debt and not rely on federal relief, that marketplace can be an option, and it is for transitioning doctors today. We'll see what things look like in a few years. So with private refinancing, you're going to want to make sure that it's suitable before you proceed down that path. That is not going to stop these companies from blowing up your inboxes and advertising on television and elsewhere that lower rates are available. Don't give up your federal benefits if you're going to potentially drive savings from them during your training. I wanted to feature the PSLF, or Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, in a little bit of a different way, because I talked about the savings here often informing career decisions. So let's say we have a resident that after 4 years of training, thinking about the next step in the career, how would loan forgiveness impact the economics of working for a nonprofit? Here I'm using the average for this group, $375,000 in debt. After 4 years of using either pay-as-you-earn or revised pay-as-you-earn, you've got somewhere between $425,000 and $470,000 in federal student loan debt. Now you're offered a job with a nonprofit at $155,000. You also have an offer from a for-profit for $205,000. Now, if you take the nonprofit job and you work there for the next 6 years, you're going to come out of pocket probably about $75,000 to $80,000 based on your income for the next 6 years in an income-driven repayment plan based only on your salary. Now, if you take a for-profit job, you're going to go into repayment, essentially, unless you think you're going to go back into the public service sector. on roughly $450,000 of debt, which is going to cost most likely in excess of $500,000, over 10 plus years. So that savings is, over $400,000 of after tax out of pocket savings. What does that amount to in terms of an effective salary to take the nonprofit job on average over the next 6 years? And here in this case, we see that the 155,000 salary offer is actually probably worth closer to 245,000 on average for that next 6 years because of the student loan savings. Now I'm just comparing straight salary and the loan savings, not retirement benefits or your preference in professional development. But you'll want to have this in front of you as you get closer to transition to practice, and make sure that you're taking advantage of all ways to reduce your student loan debt. Now, we talked about the action plan here, which is, again, file a tax return for last year. You can consolidate your loans within a few weeks after you graduate. You don't have to write out the rest of your grace period. We will assist you with that in your one-on-one consultations. So I should highlight here how these consultations work, and you'll also get an email from us after this presentation where you can sign up. These are, again, free. Your school's paying for it. We will do a complete review and of your federal and private loan portfolio, take all of the analytics that I used to show you these case studies today and apply them to your specific situation. And we can contemplate future higher household incomes and different specialties, and help you figure out what your payments are going to look like and what loan forgiveness or savings you should be positioning for. We also offer an annual service if you want to continue. It's a low-cost annual service if you want continued support. I think there are a couple of other groups out there that are advertising fee-based similar services, and they're charging upwards of $500. I want you guys to all know that the service is being provided to you, compliments of your school through an advocacy group, which is us, Doctors Without Quarters. We are incented to represent you in the marketplace. And so no need to spend several $100s to get this type of support. I would encourage you to share that with your peers as well, who are being marketed to for fee-based similar services. How you will apply for the you can register on the website that I'll send you via email following this. Your school has probably also shared the website with you as well to register. It takes about 5 minutes to register, and then you should schedule your actual meeting with us for after at least 2 to 3 weeks after you've graduated. So if you're graduating, say, in February, mid-February, schedule it for the second or third week in March. Get on our calendar then so that we can accomplish the most in our time together. You can't consolidate or enter a repayment plan until after formally you've graduated. And so we want to do all of that for you in the one-on-one session at that time. But you can register immediately because these are available on a first come, first serve basis. So that's all the content I have for you here. Again, you'll get an email with that web link if you don't already have it from your school to register. And I'll jump into here to some of the questions. Yeah, I heard if you consolidate, it would be classified as private. So I would say that that's refinancing. Consolidation means you're keeping them federal, therefore eligible. I've seen graduates make the mistake of doing 4 years of residency with a for-profit or a nonprofit organization. They use an income-driven repayment plan, and then somebody solicits them to consolidate their loans. If you do create a new loan, you will eliminate those 4 years of progress you had towards public service loan forgiveness. So the consolidation, if it's going to happen, needs to happen right after you graduate and not again afterwards. But it's different than refinancing, which is with a private lender, and that would truly disqualify you for federal loan forgiveness. Should you set aside money for the possibility that PSLF disappears in the future? Yes, absolutely. I would say that I'm less concerned about PSLF disappearing in the next few years for graduates today. We're seeing a lot of assurances from legislation that they're going to honor it for those that have it in their promissory notes. That might go contrary to what the media is suggesting, but very close to this marketplace, and that's what we are all understanding. However, you might not know if you're going to work for a nonprofit or a for-profit, or I'll give you a worst-case scenario here. Let's say you take a job with a nonprofit group like Banner Health in Arizona and Colorado, or Mercy in Missouri, and they're a nonprofit organization today. If they get bought out 8 years into your pursuit of public service loan forgiveness by a for-profit, and through no fault of your own, you are suddenly not eligible unless you switch jobs. Yes, you should have a bankroll of savings that is to be determined, allocated towards accruing student loan interest if something changes. We call that forgiveness protection planning. So the answer to this question, while you might be eligible for loan forgiveness, is to, if you have a zero payment in your intern year, but you determine, if things were different, I would want to apply $500 a month towards my student loans. You put that in a separate savings or even an investment account if you wanted to work with an advisor to do that. Don't pay down additional amounts on your loans because you would compromise savings. So great question. And yes, the answer is yes, we assist our clients with that as well. Another question: if I enter repay, my current interest rate of 7% will be reduced. Yeah, the actual note and rate on the loan doesn't change, but because only half of outstanding interest is accrued against you, when your payments aren't covering all of your accruing interest, that's cut in half. That's where I got to that effective interest rate. So once you start making enough money to where your payments are paying all the accruing interest, you're back to a 6.5%, 7%, whatever the note on the loan is. Good question. Well, that's it, guys. That looks like that's all the questions we got here. I'm just going to take you guys now to the web page so you can take a look at how you'll register for your one-on-one consultation. And I'm also recording this session if you want to share it on a Facebook page or otherwise, so that your peers can learn about this. There's a handful of you on this call tonight, but there's a much larger group that's graduating in the next several months. So I want to make sure we get the word out about this unique resource that the school is sponsoring. Here is. So this is the website that you'll visit to register. There's a brief video summarizing how to register and what we'll be talking about. And then you click here to register for your consultation. The coupon code you will use for a free consultation is AUC 100. And again, you'll get an email to that effect if you haven't got one in your inbox already. So we look forward to working with you. And again, it would be helpful to spread the word to your peers about this. I don't know if the financial aid office is able to reach everyone, or if those emails are opened up on a regular basis, but we want to help you navigate this marketplace from an advocacy perspective. And congratulations on finishing up medical school. We look forward to speaking with you, and have a wonderful evening.